Hi, and welcome to Pellegrino Walk today. My name is Kevin Sisti, and we're in now part three of this series, the Great Work of Theurgy, the union channeling and perfection in connection with the NAR. And we have Steve Montgomery with us again today. Thank you, Steve, for joining us.
Yes, I'm glad to be here.
I would be completely lost without you and unable to continue this series. So thank you for showing up once again
You're
and giving
welcome.
us, yeah, your wealth of information. And man, we've been discussing things that are so concerning when we talk about ideas of perfection or even the idea of channeling. We're really getting outside of the biblical narrative. So once again, I want you to just take it from here. We kind of left off. We were talking about Valentinus and Jane Lead and Joachim of Fior. Did we talk about him? I think you emailed me about him. Uh,
Yeah, we emailed a little bit about him.
Jacob Boehm and all these guys. So just continue on the path that you were, and let's see where we head.
Okay, great. Well, it's a big topic, so I'll try to make this. I'll tell you what I read this morning. Yeah,
Mhm.
I have a daily kind of just like my quiet time, and I'll read some scripture. And it's my habit to go straight through the New Testament and then start again, and then whatever else comes along the way. So I'm at Luke 1 right now, and something that it kind of just went over my head, but I said, huh. That really counts. Luke says, I'm paraphrasing here, that after having been a witness to these things, and he sees that many people have written about, they've given an account about Jesus, he says he would like to have, this is, I think, NIV, an orderly account in order to make things understandable. And I said, wow, that applies to me, to you, and John Collins, so like whoever that's trying to deal with this stuff. Yeah, you want to try to be as orderly as possible and make it as understandable. Not just the wow factor. Hey, did you hear this guy teaches this? No, that catches somebody's ears sometimes, but I think it's more valuable to see what I think of as thematic issues. Like if you think you're going to become a god or perfect or divine in any sense whatsoever, then that's a theme that you as a Christian should not get into. So
Amen.
anyway, yeah, at the beginning of this stuff for me is by this second century Gnostic named Valentinus. Okay, so the quick outline is second century. He influences so much so people that later became known as people in the Western esotericism or the occult, or even later New Age teachings. But he had two main new sacraments. One he called the bridal chamber. And wow, there we go, Mike Bickle. Okay, for Valentinus, this he saw this metaphorically as almost like a sexual union between yourself and your bridegroom spirits. So he had that kind of thing, and boy, did people kind of build upon that later in the occult world, become more literal. And then he also had this idea about perfection. In the bridal chamber, this is where you become perfect and sinless. That word was used by coming into union with this angelic pair that's up in he called it the pleroma.
Hmm.
For people that know about Alice Beatty, that would be more like the spiritual hierarchy. Unfortunately, there are things in the Bible that can be twisted by twisted teachers, and almost exactly like this concept will be like what some folks would call the great cloud of witnesses. Not as you and I would understand it from Hebrews, but
Hmm.
as something almost synonymous with this idea that Valentinus had. Okay, so that leads to Jane Lead in the 17th century. She is a real pivotal point to me, like I've mentioned before, because she was in the direct flow of these ideas that came through the pipeline of other esoteric teachers, but she also had a foot in the Christian world. So what happened was her writings and her prophecies um, came into the hands of some of the latter rain prophets, And there's many different understandings of how this came about. But it's just to say, out of George Houghton, George Warnick, Bill Britton, and Preston Eby and Royal Cronquist, I basically had either direct communications with all of those, with the exception of Eby or Ebby. I never heard his name said. Um, and so this was done either over the phone or in the old days, handwritten correspondence. And so I was constantly asking questions about, okay, essentially, what is your eschatology? Um, who gives you the right to do this? What are the means in which you become perfect? Take dominion. That was the word we used back then also.
Hmm.
And also carry out what is essentially a cleansing purge through human hands. And so I thought I was going to get folks saying, "Look, dude, you're on shaky ground when you say that." But no, I got some that would say, "Yeah, you're right. This is kind of a spooky idea, but God will do this in and through us." So I started looking for those words, "in and through,"
Hmm.
and in those days they actually said like this: "It's a in and through the many-membered corporate body of Christ on earth." Some of those phrases. Became somewhat, what do you want to say, controversial. So people kind of steered clear of that, but they kept the concept alive. And so, Kevin, before we get into some of this more particularly, and honestly, I have to read some of the ideas I have in this outline, or else I'll get lost on where I'm headed. But we did talk by way of texting and emailing about this idea about the great and terrible day of the Lord.
Yes.
Well, it just so happens that one of the main prophets of the latter rain, who was highly influenced by Jane Lead. How do I know that? Because I read her stuff and I read his stuff and I talked to people through his ministry. He would say this, and this is just really, really poor scriptural interpretation. He said, great, meaning great for the manifest sons of God,
Hmm.
and terrible for all the ones who fall into judgment. Well, you know what? Depending on what interpretation or what translation of the Bible of the original Greek or Hebrew, uh, great and terrible have been, I think I've seen it translated as awesome. It's a
Okay.
great, it's not like it's good, wonderful. Hey, we're
Right.
happy. It's just an awesome event, great and terrible. And so he was trying to make a big deal about this, saying, "Hey, you're either in," and I heard you say this, "in with the in crowd or out with the out crowd.
Yeah.
Either
Yeah.
in this or so sorry, you're out." Okay, so with that as kind of a warm up to me, let me see. Oh, and then after the latter rain, folks that borrowed and stole these ideas from Jane Lead, you have these kind of go-betweens, and I'll put Bill Hammond in that group because definitely became affiliated with the NAR, but he was also like had one foot on the ladder rain and Manifest Sons of God ideas and one in the NAR. Another, Kelly Varner, who happened
Hmm.
to be a buddy of Bill Hammond's, and they worked together. He would show up on the podium with, or on the stage with Hammond and others, and the what do you call them? The Kansas City Prophets, some of those older fellows in that group. And you get Rick Joyner. He's another one that had influence from
Hmm.
this line of thinking. And so I can say people get really interested. I know you're very kind to give a little plug for my book, but in my book, the Converging Apostasy, you see all this stuff, and you'll see it documented very thoroughly so that you know this is not my opinion, but when I think it's my opinion, I go and say this might
Right.
mean yada yada. Okay, so for that's what that's worth, I put this as the title of what I've got here, more about Valentinus, Jane Lead, and the theurgical perfection. Theurgical meaning somehow calling upon angels to either communicate with them, to command them, to loose
Mhm.
and bind them, depending on if they're good or evil, and also in ultimate cases especially in the occult world, but also you have inroads of this in the deep end of the Christian world. Let's say Christian. Then you have this final step, which will be sort of like a union in the future to become perfect or sinless or
Mhm.
whatever the manifest sons of God used to say about all that. So here we go. Bear with me as I do some reading here. First, I say, due to the complex and completely bizarre nature of the topic of theurgy as it relates to Valentinus, Jane Lee, the Lateran movement, and the manifest sons of God teachings that it spawned, I make that distinction. Lateran does not equal manifest sons of God teachings.
Mhm.
Finally, in relation to the present day NAR, I think it's a good idea to repeat concepts in the hopes of making them more understandable. Whoa, I wrote that before I read Luke this morning. I guess I was on the right track, hopefully. Okay, that being said, we're going to first start with some very dark and disgusting content. So, those of you who have children around, you might want to listen to this later. And then I say, but with patience, you will see that it ends up at the door of the Lateran 1948, which was influenced by the 17th century mystic Jane Lead, and the current day NAR, which was influenced by the Lateran. In addition, thinking thematically helps to tie together concepts, movements, and individuals in a way that makes more sense, hopefully. Okay, so here comes some of the deep and dark and disgusting stuff. But if you see that trail of, it's almost like a pipeline from Valentinus, and his influence spread about quite a bit in the occult world and also to Jane Lee. So, the second century Gnostic Valentinus. Valentinus inspired presentations of union of opposites are expressed symbolically as male and female, heaven and earth, above and below, which I've heard you talk about that one also, Kevin.
Mhm.
Right and left. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, if you're in the occult world, the left hand and the right hand is symbolic of almost like good angels and evil angels, and they learn to manipulate both of them, they say. Five, mortal humans and immortal angels. We're talking about union of opposites. And this is where it gets a bit odd. Opposites such as Christ and the goddess Sophia. Okay, so we're talking Valentinus. These are his concepts. So the coming together of all these opposites becomes, to me, a truth nullifying blending of good and evil,
Mhm.
with the devil and Satan masquerading as Lucifer or the light bringer, the angel of light, and Sophia masquerading as the glorious and benevolent mother of angels, which you'll hear that kind of talk. Based on this understanding of all twos being transformed into one, the esoteric world has sometimes referred to Sophia as punikos. Okay? Vacate the room if you need to for young ones. This literally means, or is translated into the sacred whore,
Mhm.
in that Sophia in the esoteric world acts as a stand-in for the whitewashed Lucifer. This term is not that inaccurate. So, Sophia, oh yeah, that's wisdom. That's translated in the Bible as wisdom, from the Greek. However, in esoteric world, she's like a goddess. She's the other aspect of Christ. So this is why in my writings I say the Lucifer-like Sophia. Valentinian teachings included Jesus and Sophia as one of the, please do this for the ones who need to, they included this as one of the perpetually copulating pairs in the angelic realm, which they called the pleroma, kind of like the great cloud of witnesses, all the beings up above.
Mhm.
Jesus and Sophia were, in this line of very disgusting idea, they were divine sexual spiritual partners before the Lucifer-like Sophia fell from heaven due to the audacious desire of wanting to know God and to be like him. I hear
Mhm.
scripture when I read that. I saw Satan fall as a lightning bolt,
Mhm.
and things about him. His time is short, and he's going to make the most of that time. So you had this sort of stuff, and in the Cold World, they say this is all very positive stuff. So Sophia made this fall as a selfless sacrifice to woo and seduce humanity back to the gnosis or secret knowledge of their divine pre-existent origin and their divine destiny through bodily receiving their personal angels, which they've sometimes called bridegroom angels. This so-called restoration would be the marriage of heaven and earth. Huh. Is that Joyner who says, calling down, excuse me, heaven to earth, etc.? Okay, so based on this understanding of Valentinians, this explains what some became known as angelic impregnation, as Christ, the masculine bridegroom, was joining the Lucifer-like Sophia, who they literally say is his feminine consort. Okay, get through that. And then I put this note to myself. It says, so what? Okay, we had this. How does that relate to anything that we're going to be talking about? Well, just to show that the one of the people that so much influenced Jane Lee, that's Valentinus. Well, let's see what some of his repercussions of his teachings were. One is he was highly influential over I don't know how to call it this the notorious Satanist, Aleister Crowley. And if you're into pop culture at all, you would see that uh, Osborne from the band called Black Sabbath, he even had a song called Mr. Crowley.
Mhm.
Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, I believe at one time he lived in Aleister Crowley's house. He purchased it or rented it for some reason because he thought it had magical powers in it. So, but Crowley's Gnostic Mass, that's what he calls. In that Mass, he prays unto them, and meaning angelic spirits or demonic spirits, however you want to look at it, in order that they might become united with their chosen on earth. That sounds like Valentinus. And thereby facilitate their incarnation on this planet. So the idea is not just, oh, we receive a revelation from one of these angels. Crowley's idea was that they become incarnate on earth and lead them into, I think he called it, he didn't say the New Age, I think he called it the Age of Horus, quoting something
Mhm.
from Egyptian teachings. So get this then. Crowley called Valentinus a saint. Okay. Uh, that's not surprising based on his teachings. And Crowley also taught a path to self-deification. Okay, that puts him square in the world of themes that Christians should not go there. Technically, nobody should go there. Okay, then you have the founder of the Theosophical Society. This is late 1800s. Her name was Helena Blavatsky. And I don't really know why people would call her Madame Blavatsky. To me, she's just Helena. And so she taught a lot of stuff that was really rank and very anti-Christian. But if you've read her writings, like I've read them, then you see that essentially she is a Satanist and she takes the side of the devil over Jehovah quite plainly. So she also said of Valentinus, he was the greatest Gnostic of all. Okay. And she taught a path to self-deification. Then it goes back to the very, very dark end of the spectrum. Um, they had in LA, I think there's the Church of Satan, then there's an offshoot called the Temple of Set. There's another similar type satanic church. They called it the Church of Azazel,
Mhm.
which, if you look into Kabbalah and ancient Jewish writings, he would be considered a powerful demonic force.
Mhm.
Okay, so according to this church, they teach self-deification, and they say something I've heard too often to discount it. They say that Sophia is the true Lucifer. So the interpretation I'm getting from Valentinus and then kind of putting putting together 2 + 2 = 4. Well, yeah, there it is. Okay, so oh, another fellow that teaches this stuff, he's really a neo-Gnostic, and he denies that there was ever a Holocaust. He hates Jews, uh, but he says that he was very influenced by Valentinus, and he also says that Sophia is the true Lucifer. So they're hearing each other somewhere. I'm not sure that they all are gathering this from the spiritual realm. Maybe yes, maybe not.
Mhm.
But this kind of stuff trickles around. Okay, now this leads us to another so what. We're bridging a big gap as far as time frames there. But the 17th century mystic Jane Lee, who influenced many of the prophets of the latter rain, whom I talked to, she had this idea. Like the androgynous Lucifer that some neo-Gnostics, Satanists, and feminist Wiccans, meaning witchcraft, refer to as Sophia, Lee also says that Sophia, this is a direct quote, she may assume either gender according to her good pleasure. You will see that all over the occult world. Even this idea of I think I pronounce this properly is Baphomet.
Mhm.
This is like going to Hollywood. You see this goat man. He's got the head of a goat, and there's a pentagram around him. Well, I can't remember if they decided to eliminate this or it's plain to see if you look at that picture. But he's actually uh, androgynous. He's
Mhm.
representing both a female and male. That is all over the place in the occult world.
Yeah, what's interesting to me, Steve, is just and thank you for sending your notes so I can follow along with this. But I'm picking out all these words that we're hearing today in the NAR. And I guess my question is why are we hearing them? For example, the word pleroma is actually a Greek word,
Mm,
which I believe is out of is it Philippians? I've got it here somewhere. Colossians 2:9. It means fullness. So that's certainly understandable, but I think they either captured that word, maybe Valentinus, or maybe it was just a Greek word that was used at the time. You can enlighten us with that. But union, another word, which again is biblical, but yet the way they're using it, this androgynous thing, the male and female coming together, heaven marrying earth. We find
mm.
preachers like Lou Engle up there on stage saying, "Today we're gonna bring heaven to earth. We're gonna marry heaven and earth," and things like that. As above, so below. All this is happening. This is in the church, and then you see things like even some of Crowley's statements and this idea of I think you said it in the beginning, the bridal chamber, right? We hear that, and this idea of union with IHOP KC, Mike Bickle, the sensuality of all of this, even at IHOP and some of the problems and issues that they've had there. Um, it's like all these words are in the church, and I think you said it in the last episode because I was editing it. But you talked about them using metaphors for plausible deniability, right?
Mm.
And and isn't it interesting that all these words, well, yeah, union's in the Bible, so I'm just saying union, and fullness, the pleroma, that's in the Bible, so I'm saying that. So it's that plausible deniability, but yet, isn't this what Alice Bailey said would happen with the forerunners? We're gradually going to bring this stuff into everybody's language and then all of a sudden twist the narrative. And I think we're seeing that.
Yeah, a couple of things that pop into my mind when you were talking just now is pleroma. Right, it's a biblical term. And Valentinus would talk about the fullness. But then when he defines, like you said, you start with this term, it's biblical. When he defines pleroma, it's they're personal beings, but they're like the chain of being is what he called it, which is very
Mhm.
easily morphed into the great cloud of witnesses. But he said there's an impersonal force. It's not God as we would think of Jehovah or as God the Father.
Right.
But he's expressed through these many different layers of divinity, if you want to put it that way, angelic beings. And that leads into so it's personalizing. The pleroma is not a concept like an impersonal thing, the fullness of God. Okay, well, I don't know if that's impersonal or not, but Valentinus definitely makes it more of a personal thing. These are beings.
Mm,
And the part about union of having heaven and earth uh, joining in union, well, that's again, this is a concept you hear all the time in the occult world, is um, the reconciliation of all opposites.
right.
Well, we've got Christ and the devil. Does that mean that they reconcile and join together? In the occult world, yes, it does mean that for a lot of folks. The Lucifer and Christ dichotomy, the two are different sides of the same heavenly force. They're the pair of Christ and Sophia. You got male, female there, and they're in union in the heavenlies. Then Sophia is kicked out of heaven for wanting to be like God. And then the idea of them coming back into union. Okay, so if you take the concepts as metaphors, which the occult world is full of, and some of them overlap, some of them seem contradictory, but if you boil it all down, then you have beings above coming into union with folks here below, and that is the ultimate goal of this reconciliation or restoration. So, yeah, you can hear that in the Christian world. We're being reconciled to God through Christ. Okay, that's obviously a good concept to latch a hold of. But once you start using that kind of terminology, then if you've got somebody who's a scripture twister, they'll just take that and soup it up and make it into something else. And I think either you mentioned this or I did, but uh, Bill Britton was kind of a sly fella, and he was directly influenced by Jane Lead and part of the latter reign, considered a prophet. He had this big deal he would make about, he kind of like string you along. He'd say, "Where, beloved, is heaven?" Oh, okay. Yeah, we never really figured that one out, did we? And then he evidently has figured it out because heaven is those who have gone on before and reside in the great cloud of witnesses, and they cannot come into perfection without us. So it's kind of loosely working through Hebrews, some of the
Mhm.
concepts there, but he's squarely placed him in the pipeline of rotten doctrine that you can get through Lead and on back for through Valentinus. So yeah, there it is. And so anyway, I hope I don't go blah 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 too long. Yeah, I can see it ending to this about a half a page down. Okay, so who was Jane Lead? Who influenced her, and what is her legacy? So, brief history, but I don't need to go way into it. In the late 1600s, which means 17th century, Jane Lead and John Portage formed a new version of esoteric Christianity, and they called it the Philadelphian Society. They did this apparently with the help of, here she is again, Sophia, who appeared apparently to Lead on numerous occasions and inspired her. So, what did Sophia say to Lead? Well, according to Lead, Sophia said that she would unfold the greatest of secrets about the golden age to come, in which, and here's where manifest sons of God ideas kick in
Mm,
which there will be a swallowing up of mortality in immortality. Okay, so you open your Bible, you go to Romans 8 and other locations in Corinthians where, mortality will be transformed into immortality, that which is corrupted will become incorruptible. Okay, so that concept is correct. Does that happen before a literal Jesus Christ returns to earth? That's the crux of the matter sometimes with these
mhm.
guys. And then Sophia commands Lead to take heed to her counsel, and in return, she would, quote, open up all of these new revelations to Lead. All of this was happening while Lead, who claimed to be a Christian prophetess, she said that Sophia was the wonder of wonders, the great goddess, the queen of heaven, the virgin wisdom, and the spouse of God. So we've kind of made a big detour from Christian doctrine at that point.
Hmm.
And so I say, so what? Well, Sophia, through her servant Lead, shows one, just how far removed she is from Bible-based Orthodox Christianity, and two, just how much of an impact her teachings had on the eschatology, meaning the things of the end times, of the latter rain movement, the manifest sons of God ministries and doctrines, and indirectly, but still there, the current day NAR. So, how do we trace this source of falsehood and its destination? I've already briefly mentioned, but put it this way. Without the second century Gnostic Valentinus, Kabbalah, Neoplatonists like Iamblichus,
Hmm.
Paracelsus, mystics, and spiritual alchemists like Jacob Boehme, which you recently mentioned, and John Portage, Lead would not have developed the ideas that she did. That's a pretty accurate statement that anybody can roll with. Hopefully, they wouldn't have to read so much garbage to come to that conclusion. But when it comes to Manifest Sons of God and Latter Rain, I did some like straight on interviews and read their materials. Um, when it comes to these things that happened way back when, I had to rely pretty much because I couldn't communicate with them. I had to rely on scholarly writings and not being a scholar myself, trying to sift through that. But I did communicate with, let's see, three different scholars who kind of were onto some of this stuff. But oddly enough, it comes down to you have the people that have in their hands and in their brains a lot of this knowledge, but they may or may not be Christian. So they kind of poo-poo this and poo-poo that and say, oh yeah, like that doesn't really matter. And then I don't know if you've noticed, but scholarly writings, due to the nature of their form of research and trying to prove a point, they can spend like 50 pages on defining a term. And so said this, and so said this. And they never really come down to what is it? You and I and others as Christians, we have the scriptures to interpret a lot of these things.
Amen.
So we don't have to go to the horse's mouth from the 18th century or whatever. Scripture will be accurately applied to this. And that's why I think thematically, rather than just a pure history story.
Very interesting, Steve. So I think this is amazing that Lead would have never she built on all these ideas. And you've said in the past that she's the pivot point. So she has taken all these ideas. So you have Valentinus, Kabbalah, all everything that you just listed, gathered it together and kind of converted it to Christian terms, so to speak. And then we find if you could just identify this one more time, if people are wanting to know the specific individuals that you've mentioned, maybe four to six of them in the latter rain that have brought these teachings in, like Warnock, I'm sure would be one of them. What four to six individuals would be primary for people to look at?
Okay, and I'll mention who I communicated with. There's George Houghton. At the beginning of the latter rain, this is kind of a misconception. Uh, William Branham was quite influential, but he was not the head apostle
Hmm.
that went out and kind of did like what the NAR does. The head apostle at the initial beginning of the latter rain in 1948 was George Houghton. And strangely enough, he not only was into Jane Lead and mentions that in his writings, but he also was a student of Jacob Boehme, which puts him further back into the big leagues of the occult esoteric world.
Sure.
And so when I was in communications with him, he said a lot of stuff, but one of the things, he was very generous sending his writings to me, no charge. But he also sent me a copy of a book, and I'm going to get the title wrong. But I think it was something like Living Creature, the Beast of the Field. And it probably went back to Civil War days, this notion that there's a race of humanoids that were created before Adam and Eve, and that was the black race, and they were created for servitude to whites. Okay, so yeah, George Hutton later in life caught some big time flack for that,
Hmm.
because he was kind of uh, related to Christian identity, which is a big field to go into, but essentially racist version of Christianity, and sometimes even related to the Klan and other stuff like that. So I talked to him by phone and by letter. Um, Bill Britton was very busy at that time. It was in his later years of life. This would have been around 1985. So I talked to two of his associate pastors, and they say like, and the witness of two or more,
Hmm.
you get the truth. So I'd kind of like parrot the one to the other and see if they came up with the same goods, and they did. They quoted each other, and they quoted Bill Britton. Um, then I talked to Bill Britton's daughter, who makes his writings available. Her name is Becky. Uh, I forgot where she puts the hyphen, but she was married to Greg Volz, Christian singer.
Hmm.
Don't know if his songs are still well known or not, but she was married to him, and then they divorced amicably. And I mean, that's her personal biz. But she was very open. She would talk to me. She just would apologize and, hey, I'm not a great theologian, but my dad, Bill Britton, tried his best to introduce people to a greater walk. Well, that's pretty vague, isn't it? So
Hmm.
greater of a walk that it's taking you outside of Christianity is what it's doing.
Right.
So I talked to those guys and verified that yes, one will be taken means taken in death. It's not a rapture to them. They think the rapture is one of the greatest evils to end time teaching. So one will be taken in death, according one's taken, one's left. The other will be left to inherit the kingdom, and they're left to they're taken in death is something that they would accomplish because they believe that all things will happen in and through the corporate body of Christ before Jesus is allowed to return. That kind of talk you might even hear from folks in the NAR. I believe I've heard Bill Hammond go down that road. So yeah. Oh, and you mentioned, okay. So we got George Houghton, Bill Britton. I talked to Roel Cronquist, his ministry, and talked to one of his associate pastors. And I mentioned this teaching about, we're going to be perfect, take dominion, physically remove the ungodly, and the way they would say it is remove all things that hinder the kingdom of God. Things, no. People, yes. If you look at Royal's epistles of the kingdom, he spouts this out constantly. So I talked to Dan. Let me see. George Warnock never got a hold of him, but I've read his writings. Let me see who else. Eby never got a hold of him. That's J. Preston Eby.
Hmm.
Uh, and he was one that went further into the esoteric version of Jane Lead and Manifest Sons of God teachings. And strangely enough, but William Branham, was like a sponge. He would just kind of almost very non-systematically, he would pick up things. And according to John Collins, ex-member of his group, Branham would what's the word? He would be like a chameleon. Whoever's speaking to, he would try
Hmm.
to go with what you know and maybe occasionally take you on. But I've got a couple of scholars who tell me that Branham visited a place called Mary's House of David. It's a small Christian, so-called Christian group. And that group was thoroughly inundated with Jane Lead's teachings, held to um, her eschatological ideas.
Hmm.
and also was influenced by Christian identity. So all that kind of hodgepodge.
Wow.
Uh, this one scholar says he visited that place. I think it was 2 to 4 times, and it was mentioned in passing in his recorded sermons. So you got William Branham. Um, then there's several cults, full-out religious cults. The one called The Move, that's Sam Fife. He was a big buddy of Bill Britton's, and he taught all this stuff. He might have gotten it secondhand. I'm not sure that he got it directly from Jane Lee, but he definitely got lots of stuff from Bill Britton. Okay, so I talked to those folks. Buddy Kolb was Fife's he kept the ministry going after Fife, who claimed that he was going to live forever. Fife was killed in an airplane crash and was having some problems with alcoholism. So the great prophet, Sam Fife, met his end, and then this guy, Buddy Cobb, took his place, and he kept these ideas going. Who am I leaving out? There's those guys. Oh, Roel Cronquist, I mentioned earlier. Yeah, yeah. So Roel Cronquist was in the deep end also. Something tells me I'm leaving. Oh, Franklin Hall. So Franklin Hall would be
Franklin Hall.
similar to, yeah, similar to William Branham, and he's more well known for his teachings on fasting and prayer, atomic power through fasting and prayer. So
Hmm.
John Wimber really liked that, and some other guys, big name guys, they would go with that. But Franklin Hall also taught the same thing. If I can paraphrase here, we're very near the time uh, when, yeah, I have to deeply paraphrase because I can't remember his exact words, but he said that the wicked must be eliminated.
Hmm.
And he says, taken away in death, mind you, taken away. So this is part of his teaching, and he's another one that talks about the manifest sons of God as being the instrument of this judgment. I probably left out somebody, but um,
That's pretty
if I
good.
just throw this, yeah, yeah, there's others. Some of them are lesser lights. Let's see, Moses David Berg was
Hmm.
another kind of eclectic guy who would steal stuff from everybody. He had a very perverted religious cult called the Children of God, and some later called it the family
Hmm.
of love.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, he was teaching a lot of this kind of biz.
And
Um,
would you include
oh,
John
hmm?
Robert Stevens in the mix?
Yes, he was,
Okay.
and it's like, okay, who got it from who? Sometimes
Mhm.
you can't literally trace it to exactly where it happened, but John Robert Stevens. Okay, if you can find this, there's a very well written paper that I think was available at Spiritual Counterfeits way a long time ago. It's by Woodrow Nichols. So Woodrow wrote quite well about the Walk, the Church of the Living Word, which was John Robert Stevens' cult. And Roel Cronquist was his right-hand man until they had squabbles over money. So Filthy Lucre got a hold of those two guys, and so they split ways. I have heard that people that were associated with Roel Cronquist later came into the ministry with Earl Polk in Decatur,
Oh,
Georgia, and that was the
interesting.
kingdom kind of stuff. Polk was showing up on 700 Club and Jim Baker's show all the
Hmm.
time. He's like, "Oh, a
Hmm.
mighty prophet," you know. No, he wasn't. It's a false prophet.
Hmm.
And you can look him up on Google if you want to know. But he had some perversion issues that were similar to maybe Mike Bickle, stuff like that. That again showed him not to be a prophet. So I was saying, yeah, like, without all these guys, Jane Lead would never have formed the idea she got. But
Hmm.
likewise, some of the prophets of the latter rain movement of 1948 and the manifest sons of God doctrines of perfection, dominion, and purge, along with their incarnations in the current day apostolic reformation and what some people call sonship or present truth ministries, they would not have developed their ideas had they not been under the flow of false doctrine from Lead.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. You mentioned Britton's daughter was married to Greg Voles. I believe he was the lead singer for Petra, was he not?
There you
The
go.
Christian band
That's the
Petra?
one.
That
Yep.
shows my age. This is terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, she was very accommodating, and I was kind of running down the list. I'd say, well, do you remember your dad ever associating, working with so and so? She was getting yes, 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 like check off the list. Either my dad knew them, read their writings, or at least heard of them, because they're like birds of a feather, you could say. And yeah, that's and she would give like with a love offering, she would hand out books of her dad. Some of them have gone out of print because they're little paperbacks. But when I asked her, so did your dad ever mention Jane Lead? She goes, that sounds familiar. And she looked up a thing that he had written called Prophecy Out of the Past.
Hmm.
And it was a direct quotation of some writings of Jane Lead called 60 Propositions.
Hmm.
And so I'd use those things and put them into writing. And of course, Britton would hand that out and say, hey, it's anointed stuff. George Warnock, likewise, would send that kind of stuff out. Um, oh, but something I did mention, because we started in the dark end of the pool, the deep end, with satanic teachers. John Robert Stevens, according to Nichols, is what I mentioned. According to Woodrow Nichols, Stevens had what he called an occult library. And in the library, he had teachings of Emanuel Swedenborg and teachings of Aleister Crowley.
Hmm.
And I could be repeating stuff we talked about previously, but just to let
Right.
him know, it's really negative, bad stuff. And so, yeah, he was promoting some of that biz. Um, I've got a little brief blurb here because, like, who influenced who? Well, Jane Leeds said that as pretty much her spiritual mentor was Jacob Bowen. Okay, there you go. That's where George Houghton got into it. But her actual mentor that helped her form the Philadelphian Society was this fellow that I mentioned, John Portage. So he was a part of the group of folks that were into, they're all into Jacob Bowen. They liked anything having to do with angelic stuff, communication with angels. Sometimes they call it angel magic.
Hmm.
And so I had this blurb says Jane Lee's mentor, John Portage, and again, Sophia. So where does she show up again? So Lee had reportedly, this is direct quotation from a scholar, I can't remember who, she reportedly experienced angelic revelations that were influenced by John Portage's teachings. Okay, there's a connection. Portage, who was Lee's mentor and spiritual partner, I don't think they were married or dated or anything, but they worked together.
Hmm.
Um, he also said he heard a voice, and he attributed this voice to, again, Sophia. And a little interruption is, I mentioned this to you, Kevin, but it's in my book also, is there's a whole branch of occultic teachings called sophiology. And some of the people are really scholarly type folks like Vladimir Solovyov. He's a buddy of Dostoevsky. If you ever had to read Crime and Punishment, then you felt the punishment of having to read that. And he was also a friend of Leo Tolstoy. So he's like in an intelligentsia, I guess you'd say, in Russia. But he claimed that Sophia, the same being, appeared to him 3 times, and he put it in kind of central words like the esoteric world does. He also studied Kabbalah, go figure. He studied Valentinian writings, go figure. So he's another one that's kind of doing this stuff, but over in Russia. Oh, and not too long ago, I found out that there was a slight connection between this Vladimir fella and John Portage, and that Vladimir was influenced and appreciated what he's writing because they're speaking the same language of false doctrine, you could say.
Hmm.
And just to put the nail on that coffin, the current president of Russia, Vladimir Putin,
Hmm.
he says he ordered his generals to read three different what he thought was prophetic writings. You don't usually think of Putin as a spiritual type guy,
Right.
but he told them that one of those guys that they must read and learn from was this fella, this sociologist,
Interesting.
Vladimir Solovyov. Yeah, so I thought that was kind of wild. But so what did this voice of Sophia apparently say to Portage? According to Portage, Sophia told him that she had, quote, come to manifest her creation to him, in which nothing other than the right nature of herself should dwell. So the grammar's kind of old-fashioned, but that's what he said. And then apparently Sophia said, I will dwell in your spirit and with you wander. As a result of this, Portage said that he didn't long for the return of Jesus Christ.
Right.
He longed for the time when, quote, one finds a new magical earth where Sophia will appear. So you get some scholars actually saying that for Lead, um, that she was almost like looking for the return of Sophia more than the return of Jesus Christ. So you'd get this kind of, or others would say that she introduced a fourth member of the Godhead, rather than the Trinity. Okay, you've got Sophia up there too.
Well, this sounds a lot like what Rick Joyner is talking about, where the
Hmm.
presence is coming back, and and that's typical language too. The presence is coming back to the temple. The earth is going to be restored. There's going to be a new magical earth where this presence, and the presence is sounding a lot like Sophia, or there's other terms for it in the occult world, which once again just sounds a lot like the Christian world. And I think there comes a time when we got to go, wait a minute. What's happening here? There's a mix going on, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a mix. And as you're saying that, I was thinking, yep, from Lead to all the lettering guys that she influenced, and also you're saying like Joyner, just talk about the tabernacle. Okay, well, yeah, it's a biblical concept, right?
Hmm.
But they are relating tabernacle as in the Feast of Tabernacles. They're saying like your body is a tabernacle for the third experience. They talk about, depending on who you're looking at, but you can get this concept widespread from Lateran guys. They're talking about things in threes, which Valentinus did also. And Joaquin de Viora, which we were talking about, he talked about
Hmm.
this too. Three aspects of the spirit, You got the realm of the Son, the Father, and then the Mother, the Spirit. That's one of the ways he would look at it. So the tabernacle with a lot of these folks, they're saying, okay, born again, that's the Passover. Uh, Spirit-filled, that's Pentecost. And then yet to come, when there will be perfection, is the Feast of Tabernacles. And that's where
Hmm.
uh, the called out ones, elite, will become manifest sons of God, essentially perfect and empowered to do greater things than Jesus did when he was here on his earthly ministry. So, yeah, we use that term theurgy, and I know I've already thrown some of this stuff to the direction of the listeners, but just get a feel of Jane Lead when she talks about this idea of channeling or coming into union or calling down spirits. And when I hear people in the NAR saying they're loosing and binding spirits, I'm saying, yeah,
Right.
that's theurgical. And go to any history lesson about the esoteric world, and they're going to say the same stuff. I'll say, okay, so here's Jane Lee. She says, when spirits shall descend, then a transfiguration, a more intimate union with these powers will be brought down in order that mortality may be swallowed up in immortality.
Hmm.
That's looking for perfection, I think, and has to do with spirits. She said that there's a veil that separates the material world from the spiritual realm, and that this so-called partition wall must be broken down so that Christ above and Christ beneath may join together. That's the joiner concept. And it's a corporate thing. If you get deep into this, it's not just Christ the individual. It's this almost like a spiritual hierarchy kind of thing where there's just
Hmm.
different beings. They will join. And as you read this stuff, you find out it's through the bodily vehicles of the corporate Christ here on earth. And that will bring perfection to both, apparently. These blessed ones above, Lead says, with much longing do wait for their kingdom to be open and spread among mortals. Really? So Christians are supposed to be concerned about what these unidentified spirits want. They long to be down here.
Hmm.
Okay. That's not in my Bible. Then she said this. She said, it is altogether expedient that we get acquaintance with the servants in the heavenly court. Why? Because we have lost much as to the knowledge of the divine arts and the skillfulness to do wonders. Okay, so again, she's looking for this ability to do almost like magical ideas, feats, but through connection with spirits.
Hmm.
She says these, she's sort of sounding like Christianity. She calls them saints. These glorified saints in the world above will meet with us frequently. Why? Because they are more knowing than mortals can be. Okay, well, I haven't seen that like a direct quotation for that kind of idea from the NAR, but I think you wouldn't have to dig too far and get, if you got like honest, upfront talk, there might be, who's him and like into his Gabriel and the angel Michael. He
Hmm.
wants to summon them to go to battle, for the saints here on earth. Same kind of thing. Why? Because, well, they're more knowing than we are. Uh, okay, so Lead says, this is pretty bizarre, but she says, ministering spirits will descend into chosen vessels, bodily vehicles, and make them all godified, is the way she words it. Okay, that sounds like perfection. It sounds like more than human. That sounds like more than sanctification. But check out that. This is something John Collins and I did a podcast together about impersonal discussions in the New Age and their founding fathers and mothers, and also Jane Lee. You get this kind of term that sounds it's impersonal, a chosen vessel. You're just a vessel. You're just a bodily vehicle for these
Hmm.
things to happen. And that's where you get the idea of channeling because, you're just the channel for these spirits. Okay, she says this also. Sophia's firstborn will be made manifest when virgin spirits descend, check this out, as spirits of light and enter therefore into holy souls who are prepared. Uh, that's so far gone. You can listen to it and think about it, but you're going into Valentinus, you're going in the route of, say, like somebody like a devil worshiper like Aleister Crowley. Um, and unfortunately, even getting something like this, the inklings, I would say,
Hmm.
this sort of stuff into the NAR. Here's the way I would put it, and I think you were asking this question earlier. It's not that they're saying this directly, but there's sort of like connective tissue. There's a bridge because they're discussing the same sorts of things. And this is how it happened earlier when people would say, they want to be the manifest sons of God as the chosen elite, the overcomers. And the big question on there is how. And for a while there, you'd have people saying it's like tarry for the Spirit to come. Others would say you have to be set apart, you have to be consecrated and pray hard, fast and pray. And then this will happen as God sees how you're dedicated and devoted. But there also was, once they began to talk that way, folks like Roel Cronquist, like John Robert Stevens, like the others, begin to say, they begin to notice, well, this Jane Lee, she was anointed of God. And she said this, she gave a direct answer, as the
Hmm.
occult world does at certain parts of it, to how does one become perfect. And so that's where you go to like some of the predecessors of Lead would be like Paracelsus, I can't pronounce this, but he has something. It's like a spiritual marriage. He calls it a conjunctiva, something like this. And that's like intermediary spirits between heaven and earth who will bring us about. I didn't put this in my notes, but it makes me think of something Jane Lead said. And she said this in all caps, or whoever wrote it down put it in all caps. She says, let it be known and let me give you notice that all transformations on earth are to come through angels. Okay, so now we've kind of taken God and parsed him out into pieces, and these angels on his behalf will bring about the idea of raising up the body of Christ into the spiritual realm where they're at one with the angelic realm. Um, okay, and so just a couple more here, and then I've got a little break thing here. So Lead said um, that these spirits will do this with such penetrating powers that by descending into corporal beings, that means our bodies, they will make manifest that which was once earthly, our bodies, into heavenly, and therefore they will be made manifest in corporalities. So, thinking about the manifestation of the sons of God, no, for this kind of line of thinking, it's not really like they're the elite, they're elect. There's a certain modus operandi. I don't get that word out of the way and say there's a certain way in which this is to happen, and it's not through our power, it's through the spiritual realm, these angelic beings.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at the one statement from Lead here, and I guess we probably need to bring this to a close. We'll probably do a fourth one, uh, so that we can finish up. And I think I may have, with some of my questions, may have made this a little bit longer today, but I think it's important to connect it to where we're at today. But looking at this statement, Sophia's firstborn will be made manifest when virgin spirits descend as spirits of light, and
Mm,
enter therefore into holy souls who are prepared. We did a short. I did a short based on some of the information that you were presenting, and I believe it was the first episode that we did of this, and it had Dean Briggs in it. And
uh,
he was in Australia at a church in Australia, and he during the prayer set said something to the nature of, now, I want you to allow light to enter your body. And I
uh-huh.
want you to imagine this. Use your imagination. Allow light to enter your body and become possessed by the light. Become possessed by the
So he
light.
used that term?
He used that
He
term,
used that
yeah.
term?
And you'd have to go back to
Huh.
that short to, and again, I'm trying to paraphrase, but that's pretty close.
Mm,
And so once again, I'm seeing these connections by everything, that everything is being switched. As I've said so many times in these videos that I've done, is that the God is being switched slowly and
mm,
methodically and incrementally along the way, so that you don't even recognize. We've got all the churches and all the forms, but they're changing the God and slipping a new one in, and it's just incredible to hear you talk about all this in the occult world, the esoteric world. And I'm looking at it from the stuff that I'm looking at on a daily basis, which makes me crazy sometimes. But hey, this is in the church, folks, and this is pretty scary. But in closing, at least for this episode, brother, how would you like to close this one?
Well, the way you're just mentioning that, okay, this goes again to scholars that would study Valentinus or else Jane Lead or else some of these other folks that preceded the latter rain. Um, Valentinus actually, according to scholars, he had several ways that he would communicate this light, and one of them was as light. And so boy, I don't know if I can directly quote him, but there's one of these statements he said where he said, um, let the light of perfection, something like that, come and take hold of you and be taken by this light. And for him, this was in, I think, in the bridal chamber sacrament that he introduced, where this would bring perfection. And so, yeah, I was kind of taken back when I first saw scholars, not somebody teaching about, end times from a Christian perspective, but scholars who may or may not have any connection with being a believer. But they would say that they would use words like possess. They'd say that early teachings from Valentinus and others essentially are like possession. And yeah, there's a scholar who let me see, April, no, it's Dr. April DeConick, and I believe she teaches at Rice, and she's a big expert on Gnosticism, in particular Valentinian Gnosticism. And and she's one of those ones. I believe she's a feminist scholar, and so she doesn't really see this like you and I would in being judged and understood through our knowledge of Scripture. She sees it just, oh yeah, they said this. And she even made some comparisons to certain movies, like say uh, The Matrix. She said you can find elements of this kind of stuff in The Matrix, where you get the blue pill and the red pill, etc.
Hmm. Hmm.
And yeah, so that's what I think is it's out there. But if you look, okay, here's my fifth grade teacher hat coming on. So when I was teaching fifth graders, they read something and you say, okay, what does that mean to you? And they tell you something like, my dog is happy. And I said, no, well, we just read something from Huckleberry Finn. How does it? And so they're way, way off the point. And so you have to kind of teach them as best as possible to say, this is a supporting bit of detail. And here's the main point right here. And that's why I keep harping on thematic. So in my book, I identified 10 main themes that you find repeated over and over and over in the occult world, and unfortunately being introduced to the Christian world through folks like Jane Leadon and Latter Rain Prophets. Um, so yeah, that kind of stuff, you really have to see, how did I come up to these 10 points? Is nobody told me about them. But if you're reading enough this kind of literature, you're starting to see what is the main point.
Hmm.
And so it's worded vastly different ways. Christian ways with the Bible being used, and then, like New Age ways in which they sort of like the Bible, but it's way, way twisted. So what's the main point? What are they getting at here? And that's kind of what I was saying, channeling theurgy. I kind of didn't even like the term theurgy because it might make people go, okay, I don't want to listen to this. Like, this is too weird. It's like a
Sure.
strange term. Um, but once you define it, you can see, oh, it kind of covers a lot of bases. So
Well, thank you once again for sharing all this with us. And Steve, you're like I said, you're a wealth of knowledge. You've read a lot of stuff in your lifetime, a lot of stuff that you probably had to put down at times because it's been overwhelming.
mm,
But we sure appreciate it, and we sure appreciate seeing these connections to what we're actually seeing today. So thank you, brother, again for sharing with us today.
great, Kevin. Be looking forward to talk to you again.
Okay, we'll see you all next time, and thank you folks for watching today. Link for Steve's book will be in the description. Highly recommend it. Yeah, get into it and see what's going on right underneath our noses, right in front of us today. God bless y'all, and thank you for watching.